Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to the She Can Ball podcast. I'm your host, Mahi Jariwala. Today, we're joined by the assistant coach for the Los Angeles Lakers, Phil Handy. So, starting off, what made you get into coaching?
Ooh, man, you going right to it, huh? For me, I think really wanting to share and help young athletes. When I first started my training business, it was more about helping kids and young athletes gain confidence, and it just kind of really spawned from there. And that was kind of where it was. But just being able to share knowledge and see athletes improve, and just being able to build relationships with athletes through the game of basketball is something I've always loved.
Yeah, now you're with the Lakers. So, how did that happen?
I think my transition into being an NBA coach was a long process. It took 13 years. I did it by running my business for 13 years, where I trained a lot of high school, college, professional athletes, and it just kind of took its natural course. I was able to build relationships with different coaches, and Mike Brown eventually got hired by the Los Angeles Lakers, and he was a good friend with one of the coaches that I work with on a daily basis, and just really through my network, the coaches I was working with, he really appreciated my work ethic and working with his players, and he just really recommended me to Mike Brown, and sometimes that's how doors open for you.
Yeah. And, what is it like to coach LeBron, and what do you think makes him such a great leader?
Yeah, my he's just so coachable. That's the main thing that I've always enjoyed about LeBron is he's very coachable. Even with his stature and who he is, he respects his coaches. He has a very, very high level for his work ethic. And I think just what makes him great is one, just he's very smart. He's very, very smart. He's not just a great athlete, but he's a very intelligent basketball player. And he's very team oriented. He wants his teammates to succeed, and he knows that, when his teammates succeed, he's going to also succeed. So he gives everything he has to his team, to his coaches, and to his teammates. And being one of the best players to ever play and being coachable, those are great attributes to have.
And just in general, how do you even coach professional players? Because they're so advanced and they're basically basketball experts. So what is it like to coach professional players?
Well, I think as coaches, we have to be experts on some level as well. And I think the biggest misconception is that professional athletes, they don't want to be coached, and it's quite the opposite. They want to be challenged. They want to be next to people who study the sport, who really are trying to master the sport, and so it's a collaboration. It's one of those things where they want to be pushed, they want to be challenged, and that's our job as coaches, is to push them and challenge them every day, because they also push and challenge us every day to be great. So I always tell people all the time, it's a real partnership between coach and player and coach and athlete, because we both have to put in a lot of work to be great. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people think, that because they are experts, that they know everything and they don't want to be coached, and it's quite the opposite.
Yeah. And I know that you worked with Kobe, but did you ever work with Gigi?
I did. I spent a lot of time with GG before that tragic accident. Kobe was really really good with wanting her to expand her knowledge of the game. So, I spent time with her in the off season, and her and a lot of the girls on the team, and just she carried a lot of her father's mentality. You could see it. You could see how she really had a passion for the game, and it was her own wanting and not his. He wasn't really pushing her. She showed the desire to want to play, and so he gave her the platform to do it, and it was really something that she was pushing herself to do.
Do you have a really memorable experience that you had with her?
Yeah, she just. I remember one of the workouts. I was trying to teach her a couple different things with some ball handling, some footwork, and she's very smart, but it was taking her a little longer to pick it up, and she was getting frustrated. And so that the competitive nature in her, you could see it. She missed a shot. She's angry at herself. So that that part to me is definitely Kobe-esque. She had her father's mentality in that regard, that she wanted to be a perfectionist, and she wanted to be really great at the sport.
I've seen you work out with players, and you have a very good way of making them feel comfortable and being able to teach them the right way and not really changing anything, but it's kind of like what you're doing is right, and here's just a different way. Like, what is your approach to basketball training?
Well, I think for me as a coach and a trainer, I have to be able to evaluate the athletes I'm working with and just take a look at them and see what they do really well, right? And then also I want to gain knowledge from them as to where they think they need to improve. It's not always about what we see as coaches, but I want to really understand what the athlete sees from themselves because it teaches me a lot about them. So I'm always curious as to what they see and the areas they see they need to improve. And then again, for me, it's a combination of working on things that they want to improve on and then figuring out ways that I can help them continue to be great at what they do. Because again, they are high level athletes, and as coaches, it's really our job to find out how we can help them uh, continue in their journey. So for me, I'm really big on footwork and balance. Those two things are important for me with any athlete that I have an opportunity to work with. I don't care if it's male, female, young, old, high school, pro. Those two things are the foundation of everything I do with training.
Why do you think those are so important?
Ah, man, as an athlete, you have to have great balance as a basketball player for one. To be able to play on balance and demonstrate good footwork, it allows you to get to different spots on the floor. It allows you to attack different angles. And those two things for me, again, they're just so essential to being a really good basketball player. If you think about some of the best players who've ever played, if you go back and watch, most of those players, if not most, if not all, they had great balance, they had great footwork, and their fundamentals were at a high level.
And another thing you like to focus on is ball handling. You say to keep a wide base, but another thing you say is like keep the ball tight, close to your body. I was wondering, like, what's your thought process behind that?
Well, I've over the years I've really studied and tried to formulate a program, I guess I want to call it, on how to become a better ball handler. And for me, being able to handle the basketball in tight spaces is really important for players. You have really great defenders at the NBA level and college level, and some at the high school level. So the more loose you are with the ball, the more advantage you give a defender to have the opportunity to take the basketball from you. So a wide base for me falls into the category of having good balance. It also falls into the category of helping you have good footwork. So they're all tied together. So teaching a wide base helps players play with better balance, helps you play with your chest up a little bit more. It's almost like being in a defensive stance. So, having a wide base and being able to demonstrate a tight handle is two things that are really important to teaching ball handling and continuing to progress through it. So it's just something that I found that they're necessary in order to be successful, to continue to be a great ball handler.
And like just planning workouts, like how do you plan your workouts with professional players, and how can young athletes plan their workouts like the pros?
Yeah, I think you become a student of the game. It's one of the things that I've done with my app. The 94 feet of game app is I've tried to help people understand how to build workouts. So on the app, there's a custom workout builder where you can take up to 5 different topics and put those topics into a computer, and it spits out a workout for you. And so I'm always trying to help athletes understand to be complete. You always want to be able to work on different facets of the game: your ball handling, your footwork, your shooting, your finishing. Um, those things are really important. So athletes need to learn and understand how they can train themselves. And so just understanding different pieces of the game, not just one dimensional. There are times where, yes, when you get in the gym and you just work on your shooting, or there's times when you get in the gym and you just work on your ball handling. But as a coach, I want you to try to be as complete as possible. So we try to work on as many different parts of the game as we can to where you can feel comfortable doing all the things that a basketball player should do.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest problems with player development is a lot of people have problems taking what they learn in their training and putting it into game situations. So, how would
Hmm.
you approach a young athlete that's having issues with applying their skills in games?
Well, I think it's really important to understand what you're working on. Make sure you work on the right things, right? I always tell coaches, I always tell trainers, and I tell players, Keep your training functional and keep it applicable to the game. So everything you're doing as an athlete and as a trainer, everything you do should translate to the game immediately. A player should have an understanding of how that applies. If you're working on ball handling, you're working on shooting, they should understand, okay, I can see how this works. If you're working on a different finish at the rim, they should understand exactly how that works and how it fits into the game. If a player is scratching their head about drills that they're doing, then the translation is lost, right? Well, then they're thinking, okay, well, how does this apply to the game? So keeping your training simple is really, really important to keep the training simple. It's not rocket science. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You can get real dynamic and advanced with your training, but always make it applicable to the game. And I always try to tell people that, to where you understand, you walk away from the basketball court feeling and knowing that you got better at something, and you understand the why as to how that fits into the game.
So true. I know you also work with a lot of the top female basketball players, Gigi Watkins, Jiggy Izzy, Chelsea Gray, the list goes on. But like, why do you feel so passionate about helping female basketball players and growing the women's game?
Wow, man, that's a great question. I think everybody knows that Kobe was really very strong on that initiative with Gigi and the teams. I've always been a fan of women's basketball uh, because I think people don't really understand how talented the women athletes are. Like the skill level of the ladies in the WNBA and college and high school. I mean, women's basketball is taking off to a whole new trajectory. And I think that people just don't understand, because one, maybe they're not as athletic as men. They don't run or jump, as fast as men. So people tend to think that the sport is not, yeah, it's not the same, but it is. And so for me, being able to actually dive into the women's basketball and help these ladies improve their skill, and and, and as I'm working with them, I'm learning. I'm still learning, because they are so detail oriented. Women are so much different than men. They pay attention to the small details because that's where the game is played for them. And so I think the sport of basketball for women is really growing. And I think people are really starting to take notice that women can play this game, and they can play it at a very high level. So it's been a great thing for me to take that on, and I want to continue doing it. I've obviously built a great relationship with Jewel Lloyd, who's a phenomenal player, and just really just want to help women's basketball just continue to gain the respect that the sport needs.
Yeah, and I think you've done such an incredible job with that. I reached out to you a long time ago just because I knew like the work you're putting in for women's basketball and how like subconsciously you were really changing the game, because you weren't making it a big deal like, oh, I'm training with female basketball players. You weren't doing it for the hype. You were doing it because you genuinely wanted to help female basketball players. And I think that in itself is really incredible. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Well, I say this all the time: you're basketball players. Basketball doesn't know your gender. It doesn't know your race. It doesn't know your age. Basketball is a universal game, and I don't care what you are, male, female. If you're playing basketball, you're a basketball player. So that's just the way I approach it. I train everybody the same.
How do you teach players to stay calm during high pressure moments?
I think that comes from your preparation, right? We that's why we train, and that's why we spend so much time preparing for games and for big moments. And so I try to tell athletes of all ages all the time: look, trust your work. The work that you put in, you should always gain confidence from it. That's really important to understand, right? If you're doing all this work, you want to build, you're building equity, you're building confidence in your reps. So I try to tell athletes all the time, like, you've done this 100 times, right? So trust what you're doing. When you get on the floor, it's familiar to you. You shot this layup 100 times, you shot that 3-pointer 100 times. So make or miss, don't ever lose the confidence, because you spent all that time in the gym working on your game. And so when you get into the game, you should feel confident and comfortable, because you put the work in. So I always try to use the phrase of trusting your work, and that allows you to know that, hey, I'm prepared for this, right? I did the work, so I'm prepared. And then you can just go out and be confident in your abilities.
And like, what is it like to be coaching in those situations?
Well, it's the same. I think coach and player, they're the same. Coaches have to prepare too. We have to study our opponents. It's not just we just show up to the game and we give directives or point and do this. No, we have to study. We have to know what our opponents are doing. We have to know, have a game plan for our team. So coaches have to prepare just like players. Players are more on the court, more physical, and the coaches are less physical, more mental. And the players are mental as well. But we have to prepare just like players do, in the sense of being prepared for our opponent, knowing their tendencies. And if we're not prepared, then that's when you have, the anxiousness, or you're nervous, or, you're not confident in what you're doing. So again, it falls back onto just being very well prepared for your opponents.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't get to see that, right? The coaching side of it. I think there's a lot of work that goes into that that people just don't get to see.
It's a labor of love. Now I call it labor of love. I mean, we work, but it's a passion. It's a passion job, right? I don't feel like I work, even though we do work hard. I love what I do, so I get up every day and I try to tackle my job with that mindset of I'm blessed to be a coach. I'm blessed to get paid to do something that I really love. So it doesn't feel like I've had a job for a long time.
And another question I have is like, we still work with a lot of young athletes. Like, why do you keep working with young athletes? Like, why do you think that it's important to work with them? Because once you get to your stature, I mean, there's really no need, right? Like, you don't have to be working with them, but you want to. So, like, where does that come from?
That's where I started. And for me, it's not about the money or the stature. It's about my love for the game. I absolutely love the game of basketball. It's like my lifeline. And so for me to be able to work with athletes of all ages, that's I feel like that's my calling. I feel like that's what I was put on this earth to do. And so I started with the youth, and I will never move away from that. That's what got me to where I am today. And so for me to be able to continue to tap into young athletes and help them reach their goals and help them become better people on and off the floor, that's something I love to do on a daily basis.
You talk a lot about just learning the game of basketball. Like, what advice do you have for young hoopers? Like, what can they do to just keep learning?
I mean, that's just it right there, right? We're always learning. The moment that we think we know the game, the ins and outs, or we know everything about the game, then we're going to stop learning. And so even for me, every time I step on the floor, I don't care what athlete, I don't care what age, what level, every time I step on the floor, I learn something. And that's one of the best things about the sport, is that you're continually learning. So that in itself is something that every athlete needs to do. Stay a student of the game, continue to learn the game, continue to study the game. And it's endless. We can never actually master the game of basketball, but that's the goal, right? We're,
Yeah.
we're, we're aiming to master the sport. And as you're doing that, it's always going to throw you different twists and turns, and you're always going to learn something new. And I'm just going to say it. If athletes feel like they've mastered this game, or they know everything about it, then they've already stopped learning.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn every time, no matter how you're playing, whether it be a good game or a bad game. It goes into another question. Like, have you ever seen players that go through maybe a slump or like a few bad games? Like, how do they bounce back from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the greatest players ever played, they go through slumps or they have bad games. And again, that leads back to being confident and always trusting the work that you put in, right? You never stop working. If you're in a slump, the biggest thing that you can do is you keep working. Because if you stop working, then you're dead. I use that phrase all the time, right? It makes sense. If you're in a slump, the best thing that you can do is you have to keep working, because at some point your work is going to kick in. Your hard work is never in vain. It's going to kick in. It's going to reap the benefits of what you're doing. But if you're not working, then you're never going to make those gains. So you go through slumps. And the thing about it is you just keep working every day. You keep working, you keep working, you keep working, and eventually things will even out.
Yeah, awesome. Lastly, do you have any advice for girls that are looking to pursue basketball at a high level?
Absolutely. It's again, girls, boys, it doesn't matter. If you're looking to pursue basketball at a high level, it's all about putting in the work. That is the main thing, right? The work will allow you to improve. And once you improve, it allows you to continue to advance. So again, I always use the term, it's not rocket science. It's really simple formula. if you put in the work, you're gonna reap the benefits from it. So I always use that phrase, hard work is undefeated. And I really believe that. So for all you young hoopers out there, put the work in, be coachable. That's a really important word, to be coachable. We talked about Brian being coachable. That's one of the things that athletes have to understand. Be willing to work, be willing to coach, be coachable, and be a great teammate. Those three things are key.
Yeah, it's one more thing. Like, I think we always talk about putting in the work, and I think I feel like it's become kind of vague, but like, how many hours specifically, what should players be working on?
Yeah, it's not about how much time. I'm a guy that believes in quality over quantity. So it's the kind of work that you put in, right? I've learned how to work people out in 20 or 30 minutes and get done in 20 or 30 minutes what some people might do in an hour and a half. So it's all about the quality. So understanding that when you do work, you need to work at game speed. And so you can build up to that. You don't need to be in the gym for 3 or 4 hours. If you're in the gym for an hour and you get in a good workout and you know that you went at game speed and you know you worked on the details of what you're doing, the quality of the work that you're doing, that's what's important. The quality versus the quantity. So I always want to make sure that people understand that if you get in the gym and you're in there for an hour and you're just goofing off and you're going half speed, then you're not making yourself any better. I would rather you get in the gym for 30 minutes, go full speed, and you know you're going to get a good sweat. At the end of it, you push yourself to your limits. And that's what's really important.
Well said. Well said. Well, I appreciate you coming on today.
You did a great job. You have a
Thank you.
you have a gift for this. Very, 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 very good poise. So I'm glad we had an opportunity to do it. I'm sorry it took so long.